The room was dimly lit, the air thick with silence, broken only by the faint hum of the devices that lined the walls. Adrian sat cross-legged in the center of the chamber, eyes closed, palms resting on his knees. He had always been fascinated by the hidden connections between mind and body, the mysterious threads that science had only begun to unravel. But what he sought now went beyond experiments and theories. It was something ancient, something whispered about by sages long before machines existed. His mentor, an aging physicist who had abandoned conventional science for the study of subtle energy, had told him that the body was not limited to flesh and blood but was constantly vibrating in fields of unseen frequencies. The body listens, his mentor had said, not just to thoughts, but to the quality of energy you generate. Change the field, and you change the body itself. These words haunted him, replaying again and again in his mind. As Adrian focused his breathing, he imagined waves of golden light spiraling outward from his chest. The sensation was faint at first, more like a trick of the imagination, but with every exhale, it grew sharper. His skin tingled as if tiny sparks danced beneath it. He remembered reading about spontaneous healings, moments where people's illnesses vanished after experiences of intense meditation or faith. Could it be that they had unconsciously altered their biology by tuning into a different frequency of thought? Minutes turned into hours, though he could no longer tell how much time had passed. The golden light he envisioned was no longer just in his imagination, it pulsed, vivid and real, as though the space around him was saturated with it. He felt a warmth blooming in his chest, and a strange clarity washing over his mind. Thoughts that once seemed noisy and chaotic were now calm, synchronized with a rhythm deeper than his heartbeat. His awareness expanded beyond the limits of his body. He could sense not just the air brushing against his skin, but something beyond it, like a living web connecting him to the walls, to the objects in the room, to everything. A sudden pressure gripped his temples, but it was not painful, rather, it was like the cracking open of a hidden chamber. Flashes of color, shapes, and patterns swirled in his vision even though his eyes were still closed. He felt his body respond in ways he could not explain. A stiffness in his spine dissolved, his breathing deepened without effort, and the fatigue he had carried for days vanished as though siphoned away by the golden waves. His mentor's words echoed louder now, energy directs biology. What you believe to be solid is only a dance of fields. For the first time, Adrian felt the truth of it. He wasn't just imagining energy, he was inside it, shaping it, and watching it shape him back. His body was no longer a cage, it was a canvas. And with every pulse of light he generated, he realized that the boundary between biology and thought was far thinner than anyone dared to believe. Adrian slowly opened his eyes, though the chamber around him didn't look the same anymore. The walls seemed softer, almost fluid, as if their solidity was only an illusion held together by some deeper structure. His breath carried a kind of resonance, and with each inhale he felt his cells vibrating in harmony with the invisible field he had awakened. He lifted his hand, staring at it with awe. His skin glowed faintly, a shimmer that faded and reappeared like the rhythm of a heartbeat. He flexed his fingers, and the tingling intensified. Each movement felt like ripples spreading through a pool of water. He remembered stories his mentor told him about monks who could sit in the freezing mountains of Tibet and raise their body temperature at will, drying wet sheets with their own heat. There were healers in distant lands who could make a person's fever disappear by placing a hand on their forehead and transferring energy fields in ways that science could never measure. Adrian had dismissed these stories as exaggerations or, at best, unexplained phenomena. But now, experiencing the glow running through his body, he realized these feats were not miracles but demonstrations of a hidden skill humanity had forgotten. The golden light within him shifted, becoming a deep blue. He didn't try to force it, it happened naturally, as though his body understood what to do without his mind interfering. The blue energy felt different, cooler, calmer, like the still surface of an ocean. He noticed an old scar on his wrist from years ago, the faint line where glass had once cut him. As he focused on it, the blue field thickened around that spot, pulsing gently. He gasped when he saw the skin begin to smooth, the raised line softening, fading until it was almost invisible. His heart raced, not from fear but exhilaration. If a scar could diminish, what else could this energy alter? Could it regenerate tissues, slow aging, erase disease? The implications were staggering. He thought of people suffering in hospital beds, those chained by illnesses modern medicine could only ease but not cure. If every human carried this power, why did so few ever awaken it? A whisper of doubt passed through his mind. Was this real or just a hallucination born of exhaustion? Yet the vitality coursing through him was undeniable. His body felt stronger, sharper, as though every cell had been freshly renewed. The air tasted sweeter, every sound in the room was clearer, and even the faint hum of the devices against the wall had turned into a subtle melody he had never noticed before. Adrian closed his eyes again, this time not to imagine light but to listen. The field responded instantly, wrapping around him like a second skin. It was not outside him, nor inside, it was both. He understood now that the field wasn't something he created, it had always been there, waiting for recognition. His thoughts were not separate from his biology, they were the commands that structured it. He wasn't merely a body with energy around it. He was the energy, shaping matter into the form called Adrian. And in that realization, a new question arose, more terrifying and beautiful than any before. If he could alter his biology with thought, then what else in reality could be rewritten by the energy he carried? The question echoed in Adrian's mind, reverberating through every fiber of his being. The chamber seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat, and for the first time, he sensed the thin veil separating his inner world from the outer one begin to dissolve. He lifted his gaze toward the far wall, focusing not with his eyes but with his awareness, and the solid surface quivered as if made of mist. The air around him rippled like heat waves on asphalt, bending the shape of reality itself. Adrian stood slowly, his legs feeling both weightless and powerful, as though the gravity of the earth had loosened its grip on him. He extended his hand toward a small metal cup resting on a nearby table. Normally, it would have been just an object, cold, hard, unyielding. But in this heightened state, it wasn't just metal, it was a swirl of frequencies bound together in form. He could see it shimmering faintly in the blue aura that surrounded it. As he focused, the cup began to vibrate. Not physically at first, but in the invisible field he now perceived. He didn't push, he didn't strain, he simply aligned his energy with it. And then, astonishingly, the cup rattled against the table. His breath caught in his throat. A surge of adrenaline raced through him, yet instead of breaking his focus, it amplified it. He thought of the structure of the cup, its atoms, the spaces between them, and he directed a pulse of energy into that space. With a sharp metallic clink, the cup toppled over. Adrian staggered back, his eyes wide. He had not touched it, not even brushed against it with air. The energy fields weren't confined to his body, they extended outward, capable of interacting with matter itself. His mind spun with possibilities. What if these fields could influence not just objects but entire environments? Could crops be made to grow faster by tuning their fields? Could polluted water be cleansed through resonance? Could storms be calmed, earthquakes softened, or even the trajectory of humanity itself shifted? The thought was overwhelming, and yet, thrilling beyond comprehension. He sank back to the floor, closing his eyes once more to center himself. His pulse was racing, but within the rhythm he sensed a deeper order, a pattern as old as the universe itself. He thought of ancient civilizations who spoke of energy as life force, Kai, prana. Perhaps they had known this truth all along, but humanity had buried it beneath layers of rationality and fear. As Adrian breathed, he felt a sudden pull, not outward this time, but inward, deep into the very core of his being. It was as though the energy was guiding him somewhere, inviting him to descend into a place beyond thought, beyond sensation. He surrendered to it, letting himself fall inward into the infinite. The chamber around him dissolved completely. He was floating now, weightless, surrounded by a vast expanse of light and shadow, vibrating fields stretching endlessly in every direction. And there, in the heart of that boundless sea of energy, a realization dawned on him with blinding clarity. He was not discovering something new. He was remembering. This ability, this connection, was not a gift granted to him alone, it was the birthright of every human being. The only barrier was belief, the illusion of separation that humanity had built for centuries. The truth shimmered before him. Biology was not fixed, not locked into fate. It was a malleable expression of energy, responding faithfully to the mind's command. And if his biology could be reshaped, then perhaps reality itself was waiting to be rewritten. The expanse stretched infinitely, but Adrian no longer felt small within it. He drifted through the ocean of vibrating fields as if he were both swimmer and current, observer and creator. The energies shimmered in colors beyond any spectrum his eyes had ever seen, hues that carried not just light, but meaning, emotion, and memory all at once. Each pulse whispered fragments of knowledge, the rhythm of stars forming, the silent communication between roots underground, the way a heartbeat could echo into the universe like a drumbeat in an endless hall. He reached out, not with hands but with intent, and the fields responded. Shapes coalesced around him, threads of golden strands weaving into intricate patterns, like constellations forming a tapestry. With each thought, the patterns shifted, rearranged, and grew. He realized he wasn't simply witnessing the energy of the universe, he was participating in its design. Every feeling he allowed, every belief he accepted, rippled outward and returned to him shaped as matter, as experience, as biology. Adrian's breath hitched at the memory of his own life, the struggles, the illnesses that had plagued his childhood, the doubt that gnawed at him through the years. What if all of it had been sculpted not just by circumstance, but by the very fields he now swam in? What if every limitation had been nothing more than an unconscious pattern of energy waiting to be reprogrammed? The thought was both liberating and terrifying. Suddenly, the vast expanse shifted. He felt a presence, not another person exactly, but something immense, like the collective memory of humanity itself. It hovered at the edges of perception, neither threatening nor comforting, but profoundly neutral, as though it were waiting for him to decide how to approach it. The presence pulsed once, and an image flared in Adrian's mind, the earth itself, surrounded by luminous fields. He could see cities buzzing with chaotic frequencies, forests glowing with stable rhythms, oceans throbbing with deep vibrations. Humanity was swimming in these fields constantly, yet blind to them. Every thought, every fear, every dream was feeding the collective web. The realization hit him with breathtaking force. Just as he could alter his biology, so too could entire societies alter the destiny of the planet. Energy did not recognize borders, governments, or ideologies. It only responded to resonance. If enough minds shifted, the biology of humanity, even the ecosystem of Earth itself, could transform. His body tingled with urgency, as though the knowledge demanded action. He wasn't meant to linger in this sea forever. He had been shown the truth so that he could return and apply it, awaken it in others. But how? The world outside this chamber was one of skepticism, distraction, and fear. How could he explain what he had seen? Adrian focused again on the golden threads surrounding him, weaving them into a spiral. The spiral pulsed once, then twice, each beat syncing with his heart. A thought rose within him, calm and clear: demonstrate. Do not convince. The presence around him seemed to affirm this, vibrating softly, as if nodding. With that, the ocean of energy began to contract, the infinite threads folding back into silence. The chamber's walls returned, solid once more, though now Adrian saw their shimmering foundation beneath the surface. His body rested on the floor, glowing faintly with an aura that pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. He inhaled deeply, and the air carried a sweetness that grounded him back into flesh and bone. Adrian opened his eyes, knowing with absolute certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. His biology was altered, yes, but more importantly, his understanding of reality itself had shifted. And as he stood, the faint blue and gold still dancing across his skin, he felt the beginning of a purpose rising inside him. The energy fields were not just his to explore. They were humanity's to reclaim. Adrian stood in the chamber for several minutes, his body trembling not with weakness but with a force that felt larger than himself. Every breath he took seemed to vibrate into the walls, every step left a trace of warmth on the ground. He reached for the door, and even the handle felt alive beneath his touch, humming faintly as though it recognized the change in him. When he stepped outside, the air of the night struck him like a baptism. The stars shimmered in the sky, brighter and sharper than he had ever seen, as if they too were threads woven into the same web of energy he now understood. The world wasn't silent. It buzzed. The leaves of the trees nearby radiated a green frequency, steady and soothing. The street lamp at the corner flickered, its light oddly jagged and restless, emitting discordant pulses. Even the distant hum of a passing car was more than sound, it was a vibration that stretched across the fields, momentarily brushing against his aura before fading away. He realized then that he was no longer just seeing the world, he was reading it, like a book of frequencies laid bare. A memory came unbidden. His mentor, months ago, had warned him of something. When you awaken the fields, you awaken responsibility. The body is only the first step. What you alter within yourself can ripple outward, whether you intend it or not. At the time, Adrian thought it was a poetic warning, but now it struck him as a stark truth. If his biology could be rewritten by energy, then so could the space around him. His very thoughts were no longer confined, they were influences, reaching farther than he had ever imagined. He focused on a small flower growing near the path, its petals curled inward as though closing for the night. He knelt, extending a hand above it, not to touch but to connect. He allowed his field to merge with the plant's, and within moments, he felt the faint pulse of its life force, fragile yet steady. He breathed in rhythm with it, sending calm blue waves into its tiny structure. The flower responded, almost imperceptibly at first, then with a slow unfolding of its petals, blooming under the starlight. Adrian's chest tightened, overwhelmed. It wasn't magic. It wasn't a miracle. It was resonance, an alignment of fields. As he stood again, the weight of his new awareness pressed heavily upon him. This was no parlor trick, no experiment to be locked away in secrecy. This was the language of reality itself, the script beneath the surface of matter. And humanity, blind to it, continued to suffer illnesses, wars, and fears, all symptoms of dissonant fields colliding without harmony. Adrian walked down the path, each step syncing with the rhythm of the earth beneath him. His body felt renewed, almost remade, but his mind churned with questions. How could he share this without being dismissed as delusional? How could he teach others to touch the fields within themselves without turning it into another superstition or hollow belief system? The world wasn't ready for a doctrine, it needed experience, direct and undeniable. As he reached the edge of the quiet street, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was his mentor, waiting, as though he had known Adrian would step out at this very moment. The old man's eyes gleamed with quiet understanding, and he offered only a single sentence, his voice low but steady. "You've seen it, haven't you? The truth of the fields." Adrian swallowed hard, unable to speak at first. But then he nodded, his voice trembling with both awe and conviction. "Not just seen. I've felt it. And now, I know we can change everything." The mentor smiled faintly, but in his gaze was something heavier, an unspoken warning that the journey ahead would test Adrian in ways the chamber never could. For awakening the fields was only the beginning. The night wrapped around them like a veil, but Adrian felt no darkness, every shadow shimmered faintly with hidden light. His mentor stepped closer, the lines on his weathered face etched with both wisdom and fatigue. There was no surprise in his eyes, only the steady recognition of someone who had walked this path long ago. "You've touched the truth," the old man said softly, his voice almost blending into the hum of the energy fields around them. "But truth is only a key. It opens a door, yes, but it also demands you walk through it." Adrian's chest tightened with anticipation. He wanted to speak, to explain everything he had felt, but words felt inadequate against the enormity of his experience. Instead, he listened, sensing that every word his mentor spoke was more than sound, it was vibration, carrying resonance that worked its way into his very cells. "Do you think the world is ready?" Adrian finally asked, his voice barely louder than a whisper. His mentor's eyes darkened. "Readiness is irrelevant. The fields respond whether humanity understands them or not. Every act of hatred, every thought of fear, every surge of despair sends ripples into the web. That's why we are where we are, diseases spreading faster than cures, minds weighed down by anxiety, societies built on division. Humanity has been unconsciously writing its biology and its reality in dissonance." Adrian felt the weight of those words press into him. He thought back to the flower that had bloomed under his field, its response so immediate, so intimate. If such harmony could restore life to something as small as a single blossom, then surely the opposite could destroy. He realized then that humanity's greatest prison wasn't biology, it was belief. The mentor placed a hand lightly on Adrian's shoulder, and Adrian felt a surge of warmth radiate through him, a stabilizing wave. You cannot convince the world with explanations. You must show them, one resonance at a time. Demonstration is the only language the fields respect. Adrian nodded slowly. His mind raced with possibilities, but also with doubts. What if his control faltered? What if instead of healing, he amplified harm? The mentor seemed to sense his thoughts and offered a small, knowing smile. Fear is also a frequency, the old man said. It bends reality just as powerfully as love does. But fear binds, while love releases. Choose wisely which you amplify. The two of them stood in silence, the night alive with invisible energy. Adrian felt the threads of possibility stretching out before him, each choice vibrating into a future he could not yet see. He realized with startling clarity that this wasn't about discovering new powers for himself. It was about responsibility, an inheritance that demanded courage. His mentor stepped back, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the first faint hints of dawn pressed against the dark sky. Your biology has shifted. Now comes the greater task, helping others remember that theirs can too. But you must move carefully. The fields magnify what you carry inside. If you walk forward in doubt, you will spread doubt. If you move in harmony, you will awaken harmony. Adrian's pulse quickened, not from fear but from the immensity of what lay ahead. The dawn's light began to spill, illuminating the world in pale gold. He inhaled deeply, feeling the energy fields stir in response, wrapping around him like a living current. And in that fragile moment between night and day, he knew the chamber had not been the end of his journey. It had only been the threshold. The real work, the transformation of not just his biology, but the biology of humanity itself, was waiting for him beyond the rising sun. Adrian watched as the first rays of the sun painted the sky in hues of orange and violet, the horizon stretching wide as though inviting him into an unwritten chapter of existence. The fields shimmered more vividly in daylight, threads of gold and silver woven between every tree, every stone, every breath of air. His mentor stood quietly beside him, offering no more words, for none were needed. Adrian understood now that the journey before him was not about personal mastery alone but about planting seeds in others, seeds that could awaken humanity from its slumber of limitation. He began his walk back into the world with a different awareness. Every passerby he encountered seemed wrapped in fields they themselves could not sense. Some pulsed with fear, their shoulders hunched under invisible weight. Others carried anxious ripples, their minds racing faster than their breath. And yet, beneath all of it, Adrian could see the dormant glow waiting to be recognized. It was like a hidden flame in every human being, veiled only by layers of disbelief. Days turned into weeks as Adrian quietly experimented, never announcing what he was doing. When a friend complained of constant fatigue, he guided them through breathing exercises that subtly aligned their field. Within days, their vitality returned, though they could not explain how. When a stranger on the street appeared overwhelmed by panic, Adrian stood nearby, projecting waves of calm blue energy until their trembling ceased. He asked for nothing in return, only observing, learning, refining. Word spread, not through his voice but through whispers of those who felt inexplicably changed after being near him. People began seeking him out, curious but cautious. He never claimed to possess power. Instead, he showed them simple ways to sense the fields within themselves. Some laughed it off, dismissing it as coincidence. But others felt something stir, an undeniable shift in their biology, a lightness that no medicine or distraction had ever given them. Adrian realized the mentor had been right. Demonstration was the only way forward. He did not need to convince the world, he only needed to spark recognition. And slowly, like ripples on water, more and more people began to remember that they too were fields shaping matter, not prisoners of it. As he stood one evening overlooking the city, lights flickering like stars below, Adrian smiled faintly. Humanity's biology was already beginning to shift, not through force, but through resonance. The fields had always been waiting for someone to remember and show the way back. And now, the awakening had begun. Years passed, and the quiet ripples Adrian had set into motion grew into waves that touched places he had never visited. What began as small gatherings under the canopy of trees or in quiet rooms expanded into circles of people across cities and countries, each learning to feel the subtle hum of energy within their own bodies. They were not followers, not believers, they were participants, explorers of the same hidden truth Adrian had once stumbled into alone. He never sought to be their leader, for he understood now that the fields were not his to own. They belonged to everyone, as natural as breath. The world, however, was not without resistance. Skeptics dismissed the movements as fantasy, and institutions wary of losing control tried to discredit the idea. But the demonstrations spoke louder than criticism. People healed from illnesses long deemed incurable, not by miracles but by reconnecting to their own inner resonance. Communities once fractured by conflict found moments of stillness where collective harmony softened their divisions. The changes were subtle at first, but undeniable. Energy fields did not shout, they whispered, and in time, their whispers altered the rhythm of entire lives. Adrian grew older, though not in the way most men did. His body remained strong, his mind sharp, as though time itself had lost some of its hold on him. Yet he knew his role was not eternal. Standing on a mountaintop one twilight evening, he felt the pulsing web of fields stretch beneath him, a living network connecting forests, rivers, cities, and hearts. He smiled, not with pride, but with gratitude. Humanity had begun to remember. He closed his eyes and let the energy wash over him one final time, not to change himself but to give. Waves of golden resonance poured outward, carried by wind, by thought, by the invisible currents threading the planet. He felt it touch countless souls, children laughing in faraway lands, elders breathing easier in their final days, strangers finding unexpected peace in moments of despair. The field carried his essence, not as possession but as a reminder, you are not bound. You are creators. When Adrian opened his eyes again, he was at peace. The work was no longer his alone, it belonged to the many who had awakened. The world was still imperfect, still searching, but now it had a chance, a rhythm shifting from fear to harmony, from limitation to possibility. And with that, Adrian knew his journey had not ended. It had simply merged with the infinite field, where all beginnings and endings are one.